Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. I hope you're doing well. I've got an important video for you today. There's important tax news that you should know about, some big stock news including Bitcoin nearing record highs, and one of the major problems the economy is still facing and many of you are still facing, which is looking for workers for your business. Whether you're looking to hire to stabilize or grow your business, we know it's a major problem. And of course, EIDL good news. For those of you awaiting new SBA funding, a few more reports today that things are really speeding up, including someone who heard back within a few hours of their reconsideration request. I'll talk about whether I think that's an anomaly or the new normal. Most importantly, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm going to keep today's video very short. If you appreciate the research myself and our entire team does every single day, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on the alerts, and you can always download our free Skip app too. It's Hello Skip in the App Store and Google Play. And later this week, we'll be releasing this cash flow analysis calculator to more people. If you want early access along with our one-on-one support, we're now booked through this Friday, but you can go to EIDL.me to get one-on-one support. Do it sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until next week. But we're going to make this available, explain it a bit more, to help you understand how SBA loan officers make decisions when they look at your personal financial statement, your schedule of liabilities, your 2019 business revenue. How will they determine your repayment ability and make a decision on whether you can repay or not? I'll loop back to that, but let me start with the big tax news. This came out today. Democrats scale back their proposal to require banks to report balances to the IRS. Now, in case you missed this, it's really important. The Biden administration, bowing to an aggressive lobbying campaign by the banking industry and pushback from Republicans, has agreed to support a far more limited plan for the IRS to try to crack down on tax cheats. A new proposal was rolled out today to narrow the scope of information that banks would have to provide to the IRS. Under the new plan, backed by the administration, banks would only be required to provide data on accounts with total annual deposits or withdrawals worth more than $10,000, rather than the $600 threshold that was initially proposed. The reporting requirement would not apply to payroll deposits for wage and salary earners or to beneficiaries of federal programs such as Social Security. So basically, the administration is trying to combat tax cheats, and the thinking is that if they can flag, report, and basically use the IRS revenue to reconcile major differences in tax reporting, they can go after people who, let's say, underreport their taxes. And the main goal here, and it's emphasized in the article, is to go after the high earners, $400,000 plus per year, those folks who aren't reporting their full revenue. You know, there's a $7 trillion so-called, quote, tax gap. But Republicans say this amounts to an invasion of privacy and government overreach, basically to allow the IRS to see major deposits in and out of your account. It was $600. The proposal is now that it will be $10,000. Any withdrawals or deposits $10,000 or above, the IRS will be able to get a record of that and use that to compare what you actually file on your tax returns. Would love to hear what you think about that. Again, one side of this says this will help close that tax gap, and this extra funding will be able to pay for programs like the stuff in the infrastructure bill. A lot of the proposed funding for the infrastructure bill is basically from increased tax revenue, increased enforcement. So this would be one way to increase that enforcement. The other argument is, of course, invasion of privacy and government overreach. Would love to hear what you think about that in the comments. Plus, this came out today. Stocks rise for a fifth day and Bitcoin nears a record high. U.S. stocks rose in midday trading. S&P 500 is up almost 1%. Today's gains mean the S&P is approaching record territory yet again, now within 1% of the closing high it reached in early September. Crypto prices rose with Bitcoin reaching $63,300. Here's the historical Bitcoin chart. If you've bought Bitcoin at any point along the spectrum here, would also love to hear in the comments. Part of these gains came with several high-profile corporate earnings reports today. For example, Johnson & Johnson reported almost 11% sales growth in the third quarter. Of course, in any article about rising stock prices is the quote about inflation. These articles are fairly predictable, as we know. Someone talks about the market up, market down, the risks of inflation, the federal monetary policies. They're all valid points. And of course, time will tell in a lot of these cases what actually happens in reality. Now, one major piece of the economy, which I've touched on a few times, is workers, the availability of workers, either for you as a small business owner or for larger companies as well. And here's what's happened. Fall was meant to mark the beginning of the end of the labor shortage as some federal unemployment benefits ended. Schools were reopening, freeing up caregivers. Instead, as reported by the New York Times, the labor force shrank in September. There are 5 million fewer people working than before the pandemic began, and 3 million fewer even looking for work. So why is that? There are a couple opinions depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. Conservatives have blamed generous unemployment benefits for keeping people at home. Progressives say companies could find workers if they paid more, but the shortages aren't limited to low-wage industries. But what do economists say about this? They say there's an overlapping web of factors. For example, there's the health crisis still making it hard or dangerous for some people to work. There's also savings that were built up during the pandemic have made it easier for people to turn down jobs, wait a bit longer. Psychology may also play a role. Surveys suggest that the pandemic led many to rethink their priorities, while the glut of open jobs, more than 10 million in August, may be motivating people to hold out for a better offer. Here's a takeaway from the article. The net result is that, arguably, for the first time in decades, workers up and down the income ladder have leverage, and they're using that demand to not just get higher pay, but also flexible hours, more generous benefits, and better working conditions. A record 4.3 million people quit their jobs in August. A University of Michigan economist, Betsy Stevenson, said this: "It's like the whole country is in some kind of union renegotiation." She goes on, "I don't know who's going to win in this bargaining that's going on right now, but right now it seems like workers have the upper hand." I personally believe the demand for flexibility is real. For any companies where you have to go on site, in person, whether part-time or full-time, those are going to be much more difficult to attract workers, especially now, given that there are a lot of things you can do online. Of course, that's highly variable depending on the industry you're in. Many industries do not even have that as an option. So here's the final point I want to make on this. Economists worry that if the pandemic leads many people to opt out of the workforce, that's been a fear for the past year and a half. It could have long-term consequences for economic growth. Rising labor force participation, particularly among women, was a major driver of the strong gains in income and production after World War II. Many economists argue that the reversal of that trend in recent decades has hurt economic growth. Meanwhile, more companies across the U.S. are mandating vaccinations as well, especially large companies. Of course, many airlines are as well. Okay, to end today's update, I want to talk about SBA news, in particular EIDL loans, increases, reconsiderations. We keep hearing several examples of incredibly quick turnaround times, including one example, someone we helped through the process, encouraging them to apply for that increase. They were approved within 3 hours. Unbelievably so. So I don't know if some of this is the luck of the draw. Basically, if there's no coherent ticketing system, new applications come in, everything seems in order, a loan officer reviews it, approves it, as opposed to the bigger pile, all these things sitting in the reconsideration bucket that aren't streamlined for whatever reason. But I just want to point that out if you haven't applied yet. I'd love to hear if you've had this experience, if you've had a record turnaround time. Obviously, I'd love for the SBA to take a look at the buckets they have, basically the piles of applications, see if they can do anything about it to improve anything. I know we're getting close to the end of these programs, but there's still over 70 days left to apply for EIDL loans, reconsiderations, increases, and that's the one thing I want to stress. If you're a small business owner, independent contractor, if you've heard about this 100 times, take it seriously now for the next 2 months. If you need help, we can certainly do our best to help you directly. Go to EIDL.me. If not, there are plenty of resources on our app and website for you. Most importantly, keep the comments coming. Thanks so much for sharing this video. By the way, if you like our news and you want to leave us a review, I'll leave our Trustpilot link in the description today. Most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you tomorrow.